Hi everyone, can everyone hear me at the back? Great, so I'm Sam Hall, I'm the Director of the Conservative Environment Network. Welcome to this first Fringe event on the topic of where next for English farming. I'm delighted and very grateful for our sponsors for today's event, Sustain, the RSPB and Pasture Fed Livestock Association. I'm very grateful to them for making this event possible. For those that don't know, SEN is the independent forum for conservatives that support conservation and decarbonisation, and we're hosting 18 public events over the course of these 3-day conference. So you should all have on your chairs hopefully this leaflet, so do take that away and come back to lots more of our events that we've got coming up over the next few days. We've got some excellent speakers and some excellent topics. A brief word about the format for today. So we're going to have 3 minutes of opening remarks from each of our speakers. Then we're going to open up to question and answer. So please do be thinking of questions in advance. And we've got someone with a roving mic who will come to you and get your question. And then we'll wrap up after an hour in total. Please tweet along as well. So our handle is sen_HQ. And the hashtag that we're trying to get started is #sen@CPC. But before turning to our speakers, I just want to briefly set some context for today's discussion. So we now have on the statute books an Agriculture Act, and this is the legislation that will enable us to move away from the Common Agricultural Policy, the system of direct payments to farmers, and instead institute a new policy that instead pays farmers to deliver public goods, most notably environmental goods through the Environmental Land Management Scheme. And the first part of that scheme, which we'll hear more about today, is starting this year, and pilots are underway. At the same time, there's lots of other developments happening in the sector. So just last week, I think it was, the government's moved forward to liberalise gene editing for crops. We're also supporting old techniques to come back, things like agroforestry, the planting of trees in farm landscapes. And there's a real movement, I think, within the farming sector, not just from government, to embrace regenerative agriculture and more sustainable techniques. And then at the same time, we've also seen big changes in consumer attitudes as well, people wanting to see more about how food is made on their labels. And again, the government's recently launched a consultation on food labelling post-Brexit. Corporates as well are wanting to buy credits for biodiversity and carbon from farmers, so creating new market and income opportunities for farmers. And then lastly, eating trends are changing as well, with more vegetarianism and vegan on the rise, again posing challenges and opportunities to farmers. And at the same time, I'm sure we'll get onto the subject of trade as well, which is the potential both to support but also potentially a challenge as well to some of these trends. So I will leave it there for my introduction, and I will turn to our first speaker, Victoria Prentis, the Farming Minister. Thank you very much, Victoria, for joining us.
I'm afraid I'm so excited to be at a real meeting that I'm going to have to stand up. And I'm also so excited to be launching this extraordinary series of events. I can't believe any other conservative network has organised anything like the comprehensive set of events, not all of which I'm speaking at, it has to be said. So, don't go to those guys. But during conference. And that is frankly because I think that this is one of the most exciting things going on at the moment in British politics, in Britain, and generally, actually. And I went to the G20 to talk about sustainable agriculture in Italy 2 weeks ago. And I cannot tell you how excited other agricultural ministers from around the world are about what we're doing. To be frank with you, they viewed us as a bit of an experiment, But I don't think that's a bad thing. We have got to get this right, and it is going to take time. So really briefly, you started, Sam, with the Ag Act, which is great. The Ag Act puts food fair and square right at the beginning of what farmers do, which I think is very important. But it then goes on to set out what we're going to do instead of the Common Agricultural Policy. So at the moment, all my lifetime, really, almost, we have been paid as farmers on our farm at home for simply owning land. We don't have to do anything, we don't have to lift half a finger. It's up to us how much money we make or don't make, but we just get paid per acre. About 50% of that subsidy goes to the 10% largest landowners in the country. That is really not an argument I want to have to make, A, to Rishi, or B, to the general public at the next election. We have got to put ourselves in a place where farming support, farming subsidy, if you want to use the traditional word, is something that we are proud of and we think is targeted at the right place. So we're starting with having to break things up. It's challenging for farmers, don't get me wrong, we know that. We have chosen to do it over a quite slow period, over a 7-year period of transition, where we take away 5% for 80% of farmers this year, the area-based subsidy, and we start to increase the payments for environmental goods, public goods, we're calling them. And it gradually changes year on year until we've moved into the new system. Now, 3 days ago, I went to see the world's most famous farmer. Anybody like to tell me who that is? Clearly, I mean, there's only one answer to that. We had a really, he challenges, don't get me wrong, and it's right that he does. It's really interesting having, in fact, a very intelligent, conservative-leaning bloke coming newly into my industry, if you like, and looking at it afresh. He was full of challenges, but he was quite excited about being paid for public goods. So we're doing that in a series of ways, which we can go into enormous detail, but I don't want to take up the whole hour. The first one of which we're rolling out really at the moment in a pilot. We've got nearly 5,000 farmers engaged in testing things for us at the moment. And this is another way, it's quite brave what we're doing. We're not saying this is the policy, get on with it, guys. We're saying this is the policy, see if it works for you. And frankly, the Moreland standard didn't work for them, so we've changed it. So we are doing a very challenging transition, if you like, and we're doing it in plain sight with the industry and changing it where we go wrong. So the entry tier, if you like, starts pretty much now. We're rolling it out already, and a lot of people are piloting things already. We move on to the higher tiers. The middle tier is going to be very much about farmers working together, working, say, across a river valley or across a particular geographical area. There'll be good financial rewards for doing things with your neighbours that really enhance the environment. And then the upper tier is going to be the one that is often talked about a lot in the press. That is the change of use from food production into more environmental measures. That will obviously affect a smaller number of farmers, because most farmers will still want to produce food as what they do all day. But I don't want to go on all day. I happily could. Please come and ask me about any of these new policies. What I would say is that this is a difficult time. We will face criticism this week from farming unions and others. It is not easy to have your area-based subsidy taken away, and I get that. But I think we've got to do it. I think it's the right thing to do for biodiversity, the right thing to do for the planet, and ultimately the right thing to do for British farming, because then we will be able to hold up our head in any argument with the Chancellor of the Exchequer or with the voters in the future and say, look, we're producing public goods. We need public support to do that.
Great, thank you very much, Victoria. And now I'd like to introduce our second speaker, Chris Loder. Chris is the MP for West Dorset, was elected in 2019. He is a member of the Conservative Environment Network's Parliamentary Caucus and also a patron for the Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation. So Chris, over to you for your opening comments.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Good afternoon, everybody. It's really good to be here with you today. In case you couldn't hear what Sam said, I was born and brought up on my family farm, small beef farm near Sherborne in Dorset, which is my home. We have about 140 acres. It's a tenanted beef farm, and today I'm hoping to bring to the conversation some insights from the small farmers. Who is actually representing the voice of the small farmers? Because at the moment, what we are seeing is those small farmers, particularly, being portrayed as the enemy of the environment by many, many different organisations, and quite frankly, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it because I hear more and more from organisations who frankly have got no purpose to deal with agriculture, to say, right, we should be pushing a vegetarian or a vegan agenda. They think it's better to ship avocados 5,000 miles away for breakfast rather than to have milk or beef from the farm around the corner. That is not acceptable, and I'm sorry to say that the RSPB is one of those organisations. So who is speaking up for those small farmers? Who is it? The NFU has I beg your pardon, there are 107,000 people employed or farm in the UK. 55,000 of those are members of the NFU, but the NFU occupies the space about farmers' opinion. Well, I'm sorry, but most of the farmers in my constituency will tell me they're either not a member or they are a member because of the insurance or other things, and they might quietly go along with what they say, but actually there is a lot more opinion out there from what farmers think and believe other than what you might hear in the headlines. I have to say that a lot of the things that we're talking about at the moment in policy terms, especially when it comes to incentivising farmers to look after the environment, frankly, is offensive to so many of our small farmers today. And the reason I say it's offensive is because we assume that every single farmer is into mass production in this country. It's fundamentally not true. Fundamentally not true. My father is now in his late 70s, we've still got that farm, and he is a brilliant example of how he has looked after our 140 acres of Dorset year after year after year since my grandfather died, and my grandfather did that from when his father passed away. They have looked after these hedges. They have taken care of the wildlife. Believe it or not, they go and feed the foxes and take care of the foxes when they're poorly, despite what some of the anti-hunt lobby would have you believe. And I'm afraid organisations like Dalesford Organic, that makes out all farmers to be these mass production, nasty custodians of the countryside, just so they can profit from the organic label, is another outrage, in my opinion. I don't mind calling them out. And anyone wants to tweet about it, that's fine. So I've already tweeted them and told them that I was had some jip with them. But I think also we've got some real problems in the farming industry. The first I should say is that I think Victoria does a brilliant job, and I have huge time and respect for her. She's been hugely helpful with my animal welfare sentencing bill to finally, those people who are cruel to animals now don't get a suspended sentence or whatever it is. They go to jail for up to 5 years, and it's about time as well. But in Parliament, I'm afraid, we have too much discussion about cats and dogs. Where is the discussion actually about live animal exports? Well, I'm delighted that this Conservative government finally is going to sort that out in the coming months, and it's about time. And I shall also be encouraging the government and others to sort out the outrage which is non-stun slaughter in this country without any controls whatsoever. Parliament is... Sorry, I'm attracting the flies. I don't know why. There's nothing down here. Parliament seems to be absorbed with cats and dogs. And you know as well as I do that we all as a nation have great care and great affection for our cats and dogs. But we didn't ought to forget, is it 94 million animals were killed without stunning in 2018? I've written to George and asked him to redo the stats because we've gone 3 years without any statistics on that, and I'm very keen to look at it. Sorry, Sam, I'm wittering on. Apologies. I was just saying, farming's become a political football. It has become a political football, and I'm afraid it's based on Labour lies. And let me just be very clear on the two things what I mean. When we had the agriculture bill in Parliament earlier in the year and last year, what we had was absolute lies out of the Labour Party saying that this bill would enable the import of hormone-injected beef or chlorinated chicken into this country. Fundamentally, that is a lie. And regrettably, that's enraged the population. And it's also enraged the farming community, because I'm afraid the farming community themselves haven't fully understood the stats and the facts about it. And if anyone wants the actual link to the import standard, I'm very happy to let you have it afterwards. But I think we need to also take Brexit out of it. Can I just ask, out of all of you here, who thinks Brexit was good for farmers?
It should be good.
Okay, right. Who says it's not? Who thinks it isn't? Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate that. I guess everybody else, I was not sure, doesn't know or doesn't want to put the hand up. So the people, and I'm sorry, the NFU have been advocating an anti-Brexit agenda for quite some time, frankly. But what is it? And I don't know, the chap at the back, you from the NFU? I'd love to convey a message if you are. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, anyway, so tell the small beef farmers that Brexit has been bad for them when beef has gone up by 50 pence a kilo in the last 15 months. There are not. I'm really, really pleased that we have this debate and this dialogue, but it's been one-sided. And the reason I'm sort of pushing a few buttons today is because I think it's important that the voice of the small farmer is heard in this debate. And I think it's really important that we have a proper discussion about all of the facts, not just the ones that some like to push. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris, for lots of thought-provoking and no doubt debate-provoking comments, which we will unpack in the discussion later. So yeah, I'd now like to introduce our third speaker, Vicki Hurd. Vicki's the head of sustainable farming at Sustain and an award-winning expert, author, and strategist on environment, food, and farming issues, and also has a book out as well called Rebugging the Planet, which you've got a flyer on your chairs for. So yeah, I would looking forward to reading that at some point.
Thank you very much. Actually, I think I'll stay sitting. I hope that's okay with everybody. You can hear me. Thank you very much to Sen for hosting this. It's such an important topic, and it's really great to see a full room. I've been working on farming and food policy for 30 years, and every now and then you get a mad cow thing or a foot and mouth, and it goes up the political agenda, but it hasn't ever been as high on the agenda as it is now, and it's welcome. And it was very good to hear Chris and Victoria's presentations in many ways. But I wanted to quickly talk about what we are looking for in terms of government policy. This is the organisation, so I hope I'm going to get the slides right. So at Sustain, I won't talk about that very much. We're an alliance of many, many organisations all concerned with food and farming. I was going to talk a bit about positive, good, bad and ugly, really, kind of agenda in the very short amount of time I've got. But we would say that the whole way in which the environmental land management schemes, the public money for public goods schemes that Victoria described, is the new way in which we are going to be supporting all farmers. We've been calling for this for a long time, so we're very pleased to see it in the statute books and very pleased with how things are going in a way. I'll talk about things not going so well, but there has been really good stakeholder engagement. Many farmers involved. You talked about the thousands of farmers involved in tests and trials, and pilots going ahead very shortly, probably November, aren't they? And those pilots really should be a learning phase for all kinds of farmers, small, medium and large, of all sectors as well, not just the usual suspects that do agro-environment schemes, but all farmers should have access to those schemes and be able to go on a transition towards more sustainable farming and still make a good living from it. The soil focus, the land management plans, really interesting ways of helping farmers to protect the ecological resource that they need going forward as we get more critical climate shifts and more unreliable weather, droughts and floods, etc. They need that soil to be protected, so they need to be supporting in that transition. And the land management plans, the idea of it, having whole management plans, it's really exciting because you can look at how nature will deliver for your farm and for the public good. And there's a significant commitment in the wider agricultural transition plan, and I was involved in a farm resilience program workshop last week. They've paid a lot of organisations, about 19 I think it is, to roll out farm resilience training for any farmer who wants it for free. 10.6 million. And that, you know, all the small farmers should be accessing that. It should be publicised to them so they can understand what all the changes mean. And there are a lot of changes going ahead. And it could deliver for environment, for landscapes, for nature, for delivering good food, and critically tackling greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture. So that's the Environmental Land Management Scheme, and the environment will benefit. But we are very worried with the slow progress, as has been talked about in various media, and the National Audit Office recently commented on that. There are real big problems with eligibility, difficulty for farmers to follow it. It's changing even week to week, some of the schemes, and I think that's always going to be a way when you're introducing a new scheme, but we really need to get on with it and tell farmers what payments they're going to get for doing what, and make it clear. And it needs to really work for all farmers, small and large, and as I said, those that hitherto haven't been in receipt of BPS as well. Pigs, poultry, horticulture, they should be going on that transition towards more sustainable farming. And there's a risk of farmers leaving. There's potential 25% of farmers leaving the land. And we're very worried if that causes abandonment or amalgamation in farms. That's something we're really, really, really worried about. Farm amalgamations means lost features and landscape, lost jobs, lost food systems that could be delivering at a local level. An awful lot, and that's well recorded in the evidence base, that you will lose a lot if we go further to losing our small farms. And sustain has been very clear from the beginning, we don't want that. So there's also a worry that the ambition of ELMS is not as clear as it could be. It should be entirely linked to targets for restoring nature and delivering on climate, but also things like pesticide reduction. We've got a national action plan for pesticide reduction. It should be part of ELMS to help farmers do all the things that we know they can do, using nature, using monitoring and forecasting, all sorts of systems that farmers can do if they're given skills, the capital grants or whatever it needs to change to integrated pest management, and using chemicals as a last resort. And part of that also, agroforestry you mentioned, it's a fantastic opportunity, because I hope there's going to be an agroforestry standard. I look at you in the eye and ask you to make sure there's an agroforestry standard that farmers will be able to access funds to create agroforestry on their livestock or on their arable farm, or do both. You know, there's such potential to have a win-win-win with carbon storage in the trees and nature, and supporting livestock health and well-being as well. There's loads of things around agroforestry and around such agroecological systems, which we think have got real potential. And linking it with the 25-year environmental plan. Sorry, I should go to the next slide. I forgot about slides. But obviously you've got a harsh supply chain, harsh environment for farmers, getting ever lower for their pound. Get 9% of the gross value added of agri-food goes to farmers. That can't continue. And Minette Battles was saying that yesterday on Saturday on BBC Farming Today. It's completely unsupportable that farmers don't get a fair reward from the marketplace. They need the reward for public goods, but and that means supply chain regulation across the whole supply chain. And that's in the bill, but it hasn't been enacted yet. It needs to be enacted, the fair dealing regulations. And finally, just last slide, the ugly. I don't know if I've gone to the ugly bit. Yes, unfortunately, this is a quote from James Rebanks, who some of you will know, a wonderful author and a wonderful farmer, talking about the trade deal, Australian trade deal. And I really hope this doesn't come to pass. As he said, yesterday, when the Agriculture Trade Bill was announced, it was highly symbolic and very real. The principle of doing something better on our islands and rewarding and protecting it died. And I really hope that isn't the case. We need to show global leadership in animal welfare, environmental and farmer support, and show that to other countries in how we do trade deals. Our toxic trade reports, looking at the pesticide regulations and the pesticides allowed in other countries that we're going to do deals with, are completely unacceptable if we're bringing produce in, which will undermine our own farmers' efforts to really protect nature and reduce pesticide use. So we need to have trade deals that really support a ratchet to the top in terms of farm biodiversity and nature. And with climatic impacts kicking in fast, that really needs to include adaptation for climate. And we shouldn't be offshoring our food supplies, so we shouldn't be investing loads of land for energy crops. There's got to be other ways. We need to decarbonise our industries rather than bung a load of crops into power stations. So it's absolutely critical that we get these things right and have a set of core standards that can underpin trade deals, and mandatory labelling of production and processing methods so that consumers are part of the drive, part of the way of rewarding farmers. They can choose products based on clear labelling standards, particularly on animal welfare, so they can be part of the change. Sorry, I've probably done too long. Sorry.
No, that was great. Thank you very much, Vicki. That was really, really great overview. Thank you. Thank you very much, Vicki. I now introduce our fourth and final speaker, Martin Lyons, who is the chair of the Nature Friendly Farming Network in the UK, which is a cohort of farmers and land managers with a passion for sustainable farming and nature while producing great produce. Martin, thank you very much for joining us.
And that's nearly used all the minutes, hasn't it?
Yeah, a long title.
So I'm Martin Lyons. I'm a farmer in South Cambridgeshire, predominantly arable. On our farm, we've been using government schemes to deliver habitat and biodiversity and various stewardships schemes the past 20 years. Many of those schemes have had problems, and we all know measuring down to 10 centimetres around the edge of fields and the complications of over-bureaucratic systems and no flexibility in the local landscape. But for me, the more I've understood those habitats I deliver, the extra beetle banks and flower margins and birdseed mixes, has actually made my landscape more productive. And as I look at myself now, I'm a business person managing a landscape. I'm an asset manager, and I get a range of assets to deliver as a farmer. We have a market for food, and I'm really excited having a market for biodiversity, water storage, and all the other goods that currently I deliver, but I don't get reward for. So there's a real opportunity of having public funds delivered, but also private delivered well in a combined stacked system. And that can really help all farmers. And particularly the smaller farmers that have more smaller fields and biodiversity and habitats, they can actually receive better income. So for like me, there's many farmers across the UK, but we felt we haven't had a voice. So the network was created 4 years ago to give those farmers a voice about how we manage our landscape in a productive and caring way. And the network continues to grow. So I've got to join this one. So there is so many challenges for the industry, and having this long-term vision. We're hearing a lot about the short-term plans, but I want the vision for the next 10 and 20 years, so I can plan my business. I'm doing a rotational planning for the next 7 years. So where are we in 10 years' time? How do I build my business to deliver what society needs, for delivering cleaner water, cleaner air, increased biodiversity, public access, higher quality food? But we want our society to engage with our higher quality food, have clear labelling standards so they can engage and join this journey of improving our landscape by their purchasing power. If we can empower them by clear labelling systems in methods of production, where it's from, how it's been produced, they can actually enhance my marketplaces and give me new incentives to transition my business. So at the moment it's really confusing. There's over 15, 16 different schemes I can get different incomes from. We need this all bringing together and stack it all up. It is talking about it's coming. I'd like to see it come a lot quicker. I need to get my business sorted, and this continuing to-ing and fro-ing and losing ambition in where we want to get to is making me really struggle. Currently, the ELM is not structured in a whole farm system. The SFI is talking about individual actions. We need to bring those actions together around hedgerows, water quality, and the incentives really should be that middle tier of landscape management plans and local landscape recovery, and bring it together. Individual actions don't really help my business. A whole approach really does, and I would really welcome more direction and rollout of the land management plans within that local nature recovery area. We need it to really support, and there is reference to nature-friendly farming systems, pasture-based livestock systems that we don't import feed for, that the animals eat the grass that's out there. We have 60% of our farmed area in grass. We have an opportunity to deliver a really high-quality livestock system. And as an arable farmer, we're now going back into livestock. I'm moving away from artificial inputs of fertilisers, but using their manure in a safe and sustainable way of grazing my landscape. And it means a transition. So I welcome new people to bring livestock to my farm, and we can have a more revenue streams from my farmed asset for other people. So we've got new entrants bringing sheep in. There's new opportunities. We need clear nature-based IPM systems that really financially support farmers to use IPM, but also we need a regulatory baseline to enforce that. Give us some carrots, but also make sure there's a good stick that doesn't hit us too hard on the first strike, but if we're not changing and not delivering, we really need some poke up the backside. There's unfortunately many farmers that haven't been delivering as much as what they should do. So what will the future hold? We can deliver a healthier landscape with healthier food. Hang on, I've got them to press that one as well. Healthier food from that landscape. A farming system across England that actually delivers all the goods and services society wants. And actually having this joined up public-private finance and public money for public goods is, in my view, a lot better way than just an area payment with very little strings attached. It does some fluffy bits around the outside. But the actions need to be not just around the outside of my fields, but right across my farming system. I need biodiversity in my field, not just a picture box with it around the outside. So thank you very much.
Brilliant.
Thanks very much. Thanks so much, Martin, for those introductory comments. Before throwing it open to questions, I wanted to put a couple of points that have been raised in discussion back to our panellists. So, Minister, if I could turn to you first. I was interested in your response to Chris's challenge there about how do we particularly engage smaller farmers in this transition, people who feel they're already doing a good job on the environment, they're doing the right things. How can we make this not sound sort of patronising and offensive? What's your kind of message back to Chris's concerns?
Well, there have been a number of challenges, quite rightly, from the rest of the panel. And I have to say, without wishing to sound confused, I broadly agree with everything that's been said. There is an innate... farming is complicated. And these are correct challenges, and there are no easy solutions. So we've had a bit of, you haven't given us enough detail. We had a lot of that last year. That was very much the narrative. Then there was a bit of, from Vicki, you've given us too much detail. And there was a bit of, you're going too fast, you're going too slowly. And yeah, I get that. And what I've got to do, fair challenge, is navigate these, you're growing too much biomass, we need to grow food, we've got to get to net zero, we've got to improve farmland biodiversity, all at once. And it's right that we have sensible and grown-up discussions about this. So the only way that we can think of to do that in a sustainable, in every sense of the word, way, is to very much engage with real farmers. So that is the answer to your question. We have got literally thousands of farmers engaged in testing things. We've also got the early adopters, frankly, like Martin, who have been involved in countryside stewardship or HLF schemes for years, 20 years probably at least. And we're very much encouraging normal farmers, and we're I don't know if I call myself normal, but we are nevertheless fairly normal farmers, and we're entering a new CS scheme this year. So we don't want people to wait for our new scheme to be perfect. That is going to take a few years. If you're keen, just join a CS scheme now is the answer. We will get there. It will take a few more years of ironing out the issues. I am determined to try to get that balance and all these perfectly reasonable challenges in the right place.
Great, thank you. And Martin, if I can come back to you, interested in, from your experience of running a network of farmers, what do you find works best in terms of engaging farmers around nature and environment? Is it something that is best done by other farmers talking to farmers, or is it something government could take more of a lead on?
Government needs to give a good framework and a direction and a vision of where we want to be in 10 or 20 years' time. What does our landscape want to be looking like, and what do you want farmers to do? But to really empower that knowledge transfer, it's farmer to farmer. Getting farmers to recognise there are so many different farmers, from organic, conventional, intensive and not. If you show an intensive farmer an organic farmer, they'll just push the debate away. You need to show them a farmer that's doing a little bit further than what they are and show some ambition. And that really engages them. And that's what we really want to see, is how do we enhance, not just around Elm, but for tackling our climate and biodiversity challenges, really empowering and enhancing farmers to get on with it, but from bottom up with a framework from above. So that's really how we can empower them, is that knowledge transfer farmer to farmer.
Great, thank
Can I come in on that really
Yeah, sure.
quickly? So clusters and networks are very much the buzzwords for getting this working together across farms in a valley, in a geographic area, right? And that's been shown again and again in our piloting over the last few years, and indeed in Martin's work, which we very, very much support. So the middle tier is where a lot of the exciting biodiversity gains are to be made.
Great.
Because I remember in Leicester, they had a very thriving farming community. When the Leicester City Council got rid of the marketplace, it destroyed the infrastructure for the engagement of the farmers. Is there not space for that now?
Great. We'll come to audience questions properly in a minute. I just want to put one question to both of you, actually, interested in both of your response. So we've recently had the National Food Strategy published by Henry Dimbleby, and that we hope will lead to a white paper on the food system. And it's not really come up yet in opening comments, but that will obviously have quite significant impacts on the future of the farming sector. Lots of opportunity to fix some of the big systemic problems off the back of that. What kind of one idea from that review would you each highlight that you would hope to see make it into the white paper that Victoria's busy putting together now?
Well, take a note.
Yes, if you want to go first, a bit of time to decide which is my one thing.
Thanks, Sam. So in terms of, this is Henry Dimbleby's review of the National Food Strategy, isn't it, we're talking about? Now, how many of you know the 14 recommendations in that strategy? Anybody? Oh, well, one or two, that's excellent. 3, sorry, James. So the 14, I mean, to cut to the chase, I'm not really very enthused by Henry Dimbleby's review. To be honest with you, I wouldn't even bother printing it out because it's not really worth the paper, I don't think. Now, I'm sorry, Minister, apologies, I know that's not online to say that, but...
It's an independent review.
It is. Well, I don't think it's very independent, because I don't think Henry Dimbleby is politically independent. Because if he was, I don't think he'd be using a food strategy to make political points about the provision of food to children and others, and I think that's inappropriate for him in his independent review to do that. But your question, Sam, was which one of these recommendations would I sort of sign up to and think is a good thing to do? Well, the recommendation number 2, introduce mandatory reporting for large food companies. Depends what he means by large food companies. I believe that the supermarkets have fundamentally ripped the guts out of the farming industry for decades. And the reason I believe they've done that is because they have massively centralised the supply chain. They have taken away the local ability through whatever mechanisms they have, commercial mechanisms. And when you have supermarkets like Sainsbury's, who, to farmers in my constituency, have threatened them with their milk contracts if they do not sell them their calves, that is absolutely disgraceful. And it's one of the reasons why I think the grocery adjudicator is another waste of time, because it doesn't really do what it should do. This is absolutely outrageous behaviour on the part of supermarkets, and I'm afraid we have seen it for a very long time. We've just not really called it out. Now, this situation we've seen with food supply chain issues and shelves and so on at the moment, for those of you who might believe what the press have to say, this is not a UK-only problem. It happens in Belgium, in France, in Germany. All the other countries of the EU, and I'm sure further afield, are suffering from the same problem. It is not because of Brexit. It is because of hugely centralised supermarket supply chains that mean they have a huge logistics network that I'm afraid is falling down at the moment for several different reasons. I'm not saying the government is guiltless in this, because we've got some DVLA problems with HGV licenses. The government is working on that, but there are other issues afoot. And I think actually the one great opportunity we have from the issues we see at the moment, a reference to Henry Dimbleby's recommendation, is actually for some of these supply chains in the supermarkets to crumble. I know it might not feel like it in the immediate term, but it is in our mid and long-term interests that these logistics chains do break, because it will mean that the farmer down the street will be able to sell his or her milk in the village shop like they used to decades ago, and I'm afraid it's because of these commercial predators, actually, that are supermarkets that have wiped that out, and I'd like to see that come back.
Well, I think Chris has highlighted the huge gap, actually, that was in the NFS. It didn't talk about that. It didn't talk about it at all, and despite a lot of evidence being given on that very issue by us and others, the supply chain problems, centralised and inequitable supply chain. So we've been saying that's a gap. We hope it's in the white paper, and we've got lots of ideas of what it could be about innovation and supporting the kind of farming systems and supply chain system where they can add value in the farming arena. And in that sense, in the community, either regional or local, and that's milling, drying, processing, marketing their produce and having hubs where they can store them. In that sense, one of the things I did like in the National Food Strategy was the interest in the dynamic procurement, which is a way of ensuring that small farmers can collate their produce as they have it, even just one pallet of carrots, into a larger collection that can go into public procurement to feed our school children, our hospitals, our armed forces with our produce. And to have a digital platform to do that, it needs money. The Crown Commissioning Service is going a bit slow on that, but they need to do that, and they need to do it well, and so all farmers can actually have a part of that pie, which should be dictated by a government buying standard, which is about good, healthy, sustainable produce from our farms. So that's something which is in there, but we want more, and we want dynamic procurement to happen.
Excellent. Right, enough. Excellent. And so enough from me. Questions from the audience now. Please put your hand up. I might take someone at the back, actually, because the microphone's at the back. Yeah, the gentleman there with your hand up. Yeah, that. You, sir.
Thank you very much, all the panellists, for your contributions. Very much appreciated. I have to say...
Could you say where you're from?
Of course, yes, I was just about to say. My name's Tom Marshall, Councillor Tom Marshall from Lichfield District Council. I'm also the son of a farmer, so I have something in common with Chris there. And Chris, I have to say I'm very much on your hymn sheet. Your opening remarks about pre-stunning, the disgrace that's going on with that, and also live exports. So very much on your hymn sheet. Thank you. My point really is something which hasn't really been touched on, I don't think, and that is how do the panel consider the sustainability or otherwise of growing maize, huge areas of maize, as indeed I believe the largest landowner in this country now, Mr. James Dyson, or Sir James Dyson, is doing. How sustainable is that for feeding anaerobic digesters when you consider that the output, which is the biogas, of course, the biomethane, but there is a huge amount of fossil fuel input in terms of transporting maize, sometimes distances of 25 and 30 miles just to get to the anaerobic digester. That, to me, does not seem to be a particularly exemplary form of green energy. So your thoughts, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. Because we've got, there's lots of hands up and we're keen to get through questions, if people, panellists can give short answers, and I won't come to all of you as well for each question, but I will come to the Minister, and particularly on the stunning point which you wanted to pick up on,
yes.
and on maize as well.
Well, it's lovely to have somebody from Lichfield here. I am Rosemary Prentis's daughter-in-law, a big feature of the Lichfield Conservative Association for the rest of you. It's so good to be back at conference and to meet people from around the country again. We've really missed that over the last few years. Sorry, remembering I've got to go quickly. On stunning, which was, I will come to your other point in a minute, we're about to, when we go back to Parliament, I'm doing something called the Kept Animals Bill, which is many things. One of the most exciting parts of it is that it will deal with live animal exports, as we promised to do in our manifesto. But I have also been told that there is likely to be some amendment that will deal, yes, by somebody who's coughing up that end of the panel, to deal with stunning. We have to go very sensitively on this. We will go very sensitively on this. It will not be government policy it will be a backbencher amendment, and we will have to make sure that the rights of different religions to eat the meat that they want to eat is still available. But there are ways of doing that so that you slaughter to order. You don't slaughter unnecessarily large amount of animals without stunning. So we are determined, if the bill is amended in the way that it's indicated that it might be, to have this discussion in a sensitive to people's religions but grown-up way. On the biomass, that's slightly what I was hinting at earlier when I said that there are spatial challenges. And while it's great that the NFU has such enthusiastic net zero targets, for example, we have to be very careful that we keep the land we need for growing food, as well as the biomass issue which you highlight, which is biomass being grown a long way from the digester that it needs to feed, is one that we very much keep in mind. And this balance is a real issue for us.
Thank you. I'm going to come to Vicki as well, just to answer on that maize one.
Yes.
You've done some work on this.
Yes, we have. I mean, maize is a critically bad crop for soils as well. It's worth noting a huge amount of soils are washed away because they often leave the soil bare at times when you've got a lot of rain. But it just points to the fact that we need a land use strategy, because we're getting climate change is going to kick in really hard and fast. We're going to lose land, we're going to lose our ability to produce some crops, and a lot of our overseas crops are going to be unthreatened. If we convert loads more land, and we've already done, I think there's been a 16% increase just in the last year of maize crops for anaerobic digesters, that's catastrophic for those wanting to find fodder for their animals or to produce food for local markets. It's not sustainable long term. Small scale AD, fine. And there's a good report from Feedback Global who've done a big look at this, and it's really problematic if we convert a lot of land to crops like maize or other crops for energy and to feed into huge power stations like Drax.
Great. Another question. Yes, this chap at the front. So hard to choose.
Thank you very much. My name is Bruce Buckland. I'm an architect, but also part of the River Access campaign. And it's that I'd like to ask you about. Over the pandemic, we've seen a massive increase in the number of people taking up wild swimming and paddleboarding, which is great to access the environment, but obviously this causes issues with farmers and landowners and potential conflicts around access to rivers and waterways where the law is very unclear. My question to the Minister is, what are you planning to do in whatever bills or legislation you're bringing forward to clarify people's right to access rivers and waterways, but also at the same time help landowners and farmers to deal with the increased numbers of people who are crossing their land or crossing the waterways on their land in the process of enjoying the outdoors?
I might take one more question because there are so many. Yeah, do you want to just pass the microphone to the gentleman at the front who's been trying to get in?
Thank you for letting me ask this question. The problem I have is, as a consumer, is that when I go out to buy vegetables, they are usually they are often very contaminated and misrepresented. I mean, I'll give an example of garlics, for example, and ginger, and when I ask the origins, the stores don't actually help, are not helpful on this, and I think shouldn't something be done about that?
Great, thank you. I might go to Chris first, if that's okay. Let me pass the question on waterways and access.
I'm really sorry, I don't know much about waterways, so I can't help you with your question, so we'll leave that to everybody else. So I think you touch on the top of an iceberg of this whole issue around knowing what we really eat and where it comes from. Food labelling, I remind my honourable friend, the Minister, the commitment she gave to me in my rebellious moment last year, and the consultation she committed to me at the end of that speech has just indeed started, and it's important. The reason it's important is because of these sorts of things. It's not acceptable, I don't think, to the consumer that they don't know where their food comes from or what's in it or what's on it. And I think we need to have a proper conversation about, if it's meat, Has it been stunned at slaughter or not? And I know this is a bit touchy, and the Minister quite rightly made the point. It is sensitive, and I understand that. And I know we talk about religious rights, but what about the religious rights of Sikh people? Their religious rights are that they are not to have ritually stunned slaughter. It's a very difficult area, and actually take away religious rights at the moment. I don't want to eat meat that has not been stunned before slaughter. And when there are 94, 93 million animals that have been slaughtered without stunning, as was the case in 2018, I can tell you now, in the food supply chain, it is there, and you just don't know it. So I'm sorry I've gone off on a bit of a tangent, but the labelling issue will allow the market to do its work, because the market will not want to buy some of these things, and therefore the demand for them fades away. And I think where there are certain things like pesticides and others, I know there was a question a bit earlier about what do we do to incentivize people not to use pesticides? Well, I don't think farmers want to use pesticides on their crops. They do it because they either have to or because the risk is such that they probably have to ensure their crops survive the year. And I think there's probably something to be said about, rather than incentivizing farmers not to do it, is probably look at a risk-based system that if their crop fails over the year, that they can get financial support for that failure, rather than just to incentivize people not to use things which they don't want to do. But I appreciate others will have different views about that. It's just an observation. I probably ought to keep quiet now.
On access, this is one of the hottest topics, not just access to water, access to fields, frankly. I think everybody in this room would probably agree that over the last 18 months, the entire nation has really learned to appreciate nature in a different and more direct way. And I think we'd probably all agree that that's a good thing. However, this has definitely thrown up lots of challenges for farmers. It's interesting that the Ag Bill Now Act came along and slightly realised that this was going to be a topic of the future. So we are now allowed to pay farmers for allowing public access. I'm a really keen river swimmer myself. I've loved this summer, particularly in the hot moments. There were one or two. Swimming in both the Cherwell and in the Ure in Yorkshire. It's a really extraordinary way of experiencing nature very directly. And of course we want people to be able to do that. But the conversations I've had with farmers, just in this last week, I went to the Lake District and I met a very nice young farmer who said he spent all day putting out fires from people's, those throwaway barbecues. And I've also had, I am so sorry to lower the tone, but I've had many conversations with parliamentary colleagues who better remain nameless about people, using fields for other purposes, can I put it that way, which really is revolting. So we need to discuss parking, we need to discuss toilets, we need to discuss where is best for those, because in some of our most precious landscapes, it's definitely not. But we also need to remember that people who aren't fortunate enough to live in the country need to have access, not in a way that disturbs wildlife or interferes with growing, but we need to make a much better way for people to access the countryside in a way that we know is beneficial for their mental and physical health. So this is the beginning, I think, of a conversation. We are at least now, after the Ag Act, allowed to pay farmers for doing that. One of the things that I'm quite keen to explore is temporary access. We grew some winter linseed that wasn't good for much this year, but it was very, very pretty for about 5 weeks. And I actually think promoting people to be able to come and look at fields of lavender, fields of linseed for a short period, really enjoy it, and view it as the treat it is, and then perhaps go back to other routes of access at other times of year. But it has to be done in conjunction with farmers. Maybe you shouldn't swim all the time. Maybe you should swim at times that's right, you know, for the farmer to walk through that field and, you know, the next week you move on and swim somewhere else. But there are ways of doing this that suit everybody, but we've just got to find them.
Martin, very quickly, and then we're going to take a next batch.
Three very quick points.
Sorry.
We need to get better access. We need better planning permissions so people can park and use services, bits and pieces. It needs to be a joined-up approach. We desperately need clear labelling systems, so the different levels of production systems we have in the UK and abroad, the consumer can understand. Why should my produce be put in the same pot as with a farmer who's doing a different system? And on the pesticide system, we don't use insecticides for the last 8 years because I recognise the benefit of the biodiversity that I can deliver in the predatory species and the pollinators. On our system, and I know many other farmers, we've reduced fungicide use by 40%. Over 60% reduction in herbicide use. It is not about incentivising and paying, but it's setting the clear targets and goals of products that are causing the most harm to our landscape, our watercourses and our environment. And it's setting that framework out and sharing the knowledge and setting out true IPM practices that help farmers go on that journey.
Great. I think probably time for the last batch of questions. The lady there in that sort of middle of that bank, and then the gentleman in front.
Hello, it's Jackie Gardner here from Coventry. I have no links with farming at all, other than enjoying the beautiful countryside for many, many years. But as I look here at, you know, where next for English farming, and I kind of listen with great concern the concerns you have that maybe 25% of farmers might not be around anymore. I'm just thinking, as you look at the whole industry, which farming is, what is there being done to try and encourage more people to take up farming? I mean, I realise that many people, it's a generational thing and you're born with the farm, but some people are going to choose not to do that. And so is there any way of looking at the supplying more farmers? Because there has got to be a lot of people out there who would like to do it if they had the chance.
Great, thank you. That's a great question. Do you want to just pass it in front to the man who had his hand up? Thank you.
Yeah, so we've spoken a lot about regarding non-stunned meat. It can be sold and it doesn't have to be labelled that it is non-stunned. But regarding stunning of fish, I'm aware that there's no law regarding stunning of fish, despite overwhelming evidence that fish feel pain. Also, despite overwhelming evidence that crustaceans, such as lobsters, feel pain, I understand that they may not be classed as sentient. So lobsters, for example, would still be allowed to be boiled alive. So what will you do to push for crustaceans to be classed as sentient and fish to be stunned before slaughter, if you agree with that? And lastly, I understand that foie gras and fur are banned in this country, but we still allow imports of foie gras and fur. So what will you do to not allow imported foie gras and fur if you, again, believe in that? To MPs, yeah, really.
Thank you very much. I think these we're probably coming to the end, so make these also your kind of concluding remarks as well, if there's anything else you want to say. But I'll come to Chris first.
Jackie, I'm probably going to look to address your question, I think, if I may. So I'm a brilliant case in point of fourth generation of farming family that's not in the farm anymore. The reason predominantly is because BSE and foot and mouth in the 90s sort of basically, frankly, messed up the farm business. Its future was bleak. My dad wasn't really... he thought the best thing for me probably wasn't to stay on the farm because it was so traumatic. I mean, you know, we talk about some things we've been through in the last year. You know, the fact that the suicide rate in the farming community today is so outrageous is I think reflective of how difficult some of these issues are. Now, the reality is also that in '97, the then Labour government basically encouraged all of us at secondary school, those of you who went to school in the 90s, to go to university, the late 90s and early 2000s. Go to university. And if you didn't go to university, you go on a scrap heap, basically. I know it's a bit blunt, but that's pretty much what it was. I didn't go to university. I couldn't afford it, didn't want to, so I went to work for the railways, and I had a great career with the railways for 20 years. And I have to say there are so many other people. My partner is also the son of a farmer, and I know there are so many people here who are in that situation. We are now, because that's happened generically across the country for a prolonged period, we now are in the situation where, yes, there are warning flags that farmers, 25% of farmers will give up. We've got to be careful we don't absorb that without fully understanding the facts. It's not necessarily because they're giving up because of the situation, it's because of their age. My dad's 76. He still farms 140 acres. I don't know how he does it, but he still does. And he will have to give up physically. So I would just say on that point, it's not always what you think. But in terms of your question about what are the solutions, well, the reality is that large landowners, and if ever there was something I'd like to see changed in terms of some of the work that the department is doing, is probably looking at incentivising the large landowners to reverse their trend to going towards a sort of very, very large farm and then contract out the farm management of it, which is what we're seeing much, much more now than we did before. I suspect that that will be the case with a number of small farms, so I'd like to see the government do that. But I also think that we should be putting pressure on the likes of supermarkets, because they are actually driving this behaviour. I'm sorry to say it, some might disagree. I'll be very pleased if you want to come and talk to me afterwards if you disagree about it. But they drive this behaviour, and we should really properly, I think, say to them, actually, if you want this accreditation to sell certain foods or you want to do certain things, then you need to invest back into the farming community. Some supermarkets do that very well, but a lot don't.
We're over time, unfortunately.
Okay.
So if you could just briefly, 20 seconds, say something.
Oh wow, 20 seconds. Yes. New entrant scheme is coming. It needs to link to the lump sum and exit scheme for farmers, so that it does exactly what Chris was saying, that new farmers come in. I work with the Land Workers Alliance. Hundreds of people want to go into farming, but we need the right kind of policies to support them on that journey. And yes, all the fish farming, some horrific things to say about fish farming, not just the stunning. So we haven't got time to today, have we? But I think this is a very good discussion, and we really need to be positively regulating the supermarkets as well in the supply chain, because they are a big part of the problem. And as Morrison's has just been bought by an investment fund in America, it might get worse.
If I've got 10 seconds, I would absolutely lots to discuss, and we could perhaps take it offline. But the elephant in the room for most farming families is who is going to take over the farm. That is a conversation that frequently doesn't happen until it's far too late. And if I could do one thing as farming minister, apart from the reforms that I'm so keen to push through, it would be to encourage families not to be in the position of my own family, where my dad is a BPS payee at 79.
Here, here.
Martin, any final comments? Yeah.
There is a number of challenges ahead of us, but there's some real opportunities of stacking enterprises, new entrants, clear labelling, pesticide reduction, and having a farming system not only just sustainable. We cannot sustain the lack of biodiversity in the soil health we have. We actually need to heal it and regenerate it. And we really must focus on that steps beyond just sustaining what we got, and a more regenerating farming system.
Great. Thank you very much, Martin. So that brings this event to a close. It's been an incredibly rich discussion. I'm sorry that we haven't got through all of the questions, and I feel like we sort of skimmed the surface of so many huge issues, but this obviously is a very lively and moving policy area at the moment. So yeah, it's great to have you all as such an excellent panel to discuss it, and thank you all again for coming. One final plug from Sen. As I say, we've got lots of events coming up. The next one is at 3 o'clock in this room. We'll be discussing how we should, as the UK, engage and challenge China on climate change. We also, I should also plug the Sen supporter scheme. If you're a grassroots activist, you want to get more involved in Sen, do speak to one of the Sen team and sign up as a supporter. But thank you again, and thank you to our panelists. Oh, and thank the sponsors as well. I should not be remiss. They Sustain, RSPB, and the Pasture Fed Livestock Association. Thank you.